Well, Puddles and I have traveled down to Jacksonville, Oregon for the Peter Britt Festival, right near Medford, Oregon, and we're so happy to have Thomas Jostlein with us. Thomas is in the horn section here at the Peter Britt Festival. He's also in the horn section of the St. Louis Symphony. Prior to that, you were at Illinois University, professor, and then prior to that, you were the New York Phil.
Yes. I've been around.
You've been around, and there's many priors to the New York Phil as well.
Absolutely, a lot of connections.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a great career.
Yeah, can't keep a job, but yeah.
But the reason we're here is because Thomas had some studies with Arnold Jacobs, and I'm just wondering, Thomas, if you can, when did that come about? What drew you to Mr. Jacobs? That sort of thing.
That started in 1992. That was my first lesson with Jacobs, January, and the reason I saw him was because my horn teacher in the summers, Nancy Faco, up at Interlaken, where she hung out in the summers, basically said, you should go see Jake. He might be able to put a bug in your ear and help fix mostly my high range, which was suffering at the time.
Okay.
And, coming out of 2 years of braces, it didn't feel good to play up there, and she thought, play for Jake. He might be able to help you. And it took a good 2 years of my calling him. We've all heard these stories of how hard it was to get that first lesson. But relentlessly, I remember calling from a White Sox game. He said, call me at 8 o'clock p.m.
And that was on a payphone.
You remember the payphone?
Wow.
The old Comiskey Park, and wasn't until my great teacher at Rice, Bill Vermeulen, called Jake and said, could you please see Thomas? And Bill called me immediately and said, call him right away, and that's how it worked.
Well, Thomas, I think that has to be a record.
I think so.
2 years of calling Jake.
Yes.
On Sundays.
Persistence is omnipotent.
Congratulations. That's great.
Yes,
what do you remember about that first lesson or two?
So, as with many teachers, I think the first lesson is when the teacher really gives you their all, their most fresh thoughts of your playing. And first he said, we got to work on respiration, not music. Respiration. So he measured me. He was surprised how low my vital capacity was. I'm tall, but I'm not all that large rib cage wise. I'm kind of the anti-Will Scarlett of sorts.
Okay.
So about 5 to 5.5 liters. He was surprised by that. But then he started talking about music, and that was where my education really began. And he basically told me if I could sing it, I could play it. And we did a couple melodies, couple books, a couple etudes out of the Blue Book, the Max Podegg book.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget going home and playing through the Schumann Adagio Allegro.
Yes.
Which is for horn. It's probably the Mount Everest of horn pieces.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought, well, let me try this and see if it works. If I sing the notes, can I play it? And sure enough, I had to stop several times for oopses here and there, but I got through the piece first time in my life, and I was so excited that his system, singing the notes and forgetting everything else, that worked.
So you just started to listen to the melody in your mind more.
Yes. Well, I think for the first time in my life.
Oh, okay.
I think we always had an inkling of that. We've had
Yeah.
teachers that and certainly Bill Vermeulen said, sing the notes, but most teachers also add on, but try to relax, try to take a deep breath, let the ear do the work, etc., etc., etc. We can only have one thought as a human being, one conscious thought at a time. If the thought is singing, then our body responds at the subconscious level beautifully to that singing. And that's where we get in trouble as brass players, I think, is if our thought transfers to physical maneuvers.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of hearing the pitch and hearing the song in your head, that's certainly that was a major focus of his. Did he sometimes he would have a student when a student would come in and this subject he would get on this track, he would have them play quite a bit until they got somewhat fatigued, and then he would really get them to think even more about the song.
Right.
How did he get to that point with you? Do you recall?
He didn't do that fatigue trick with me. Well, for me, there were 15 lessons. For me, actually, the lessons started when I picked him up at his house in my mom's RX-7, this really low, sporty car. He had a cane at the time.
Yeah.
I felt bad about that, but but
You gave him a ride to
gave him a ride to
Fine
the
Arts
Fine Arts
Building.
Building
Wow.
from his house. He
Driving Mr. Jacobs.
gave me the cab fare, you know. So I had
Wow.
probably some of the cheapest lessons around at the time. I think $50 at the end, which was
Wow.
quite a record. But I got to pick his brain
Yeah.
about Farkas, who I adore Farkas. I love what his playing is
absolutely.
phenomenal.
Of course.
But Jake said, Farkas had it all wrong. That's what he was saying, just in terms of the teaching.
More physically oriented.
More physical, exactly. If you read the Farkas horn playing book, there's some great information in there. There's
Yeah.
also a lot of physical maneuvering in there.
Right.
But interviewed Jacobs about conductors. He loved to talk. Most of all about his pedagogy.
Mhm.
That was his bread and butter, of course, his passion.
Yeah, he loved that. That was.
So 15 lessons, and I brought in a variety of challenging works. I brought in the Danzi Concerto, which is screaming high, just to see how far he could push me and get me to focus on the singing. And there's a lot of breathing talk too, and the piston up, piston down, the two lines of pressure versus volume.
Flow, yeah.
Flow, exactly. And that was effective to a point. But it wasn't until he talked about the singing that I really started making dramatic progress. My other strong memories of the first lesson, but also the last interaction with him, was the third summer in a row of going to his master classes at Northwestern. And I never played for him in the classes because I thought, let other people that have never played for him have a chance.
Right.
So the last time I thought, well, let me go up there and play for him and see how it goes. And I said I want to work on, again, my high range, my high and loud, specifically the short call of the Siegfried.
Mm-hmm.
We never got to that. All right. He had me do some buzzing. Let me hear the Carnival of Venice and all the variations on the mouthpiece, and that was fine. Played the Tchaikovsky Fifth solo. He said, let me hear something lyrical. Tchaik 5, it went fine. He said, how would Gail Williams play that? And sure enough, she was in the front row, sitting there,
Mm-hmm.
So, well, thanks for pointing her out. She would play, pianissimo and very soft, very beautiful. And so I tried to do it very pianissimo, and some notes weren't speaking now. And then he started talking about the breathing, and we never got to the short call. And at the end of that session, he told me privately, like, I've never heard you sound so bad before, which is kind of a shock,
Right.
But I do know, in retrospect, that with longtime students, he likes to, at the master class, see how much you can take and see,
Yeah.
Put some pressure on you,
Right.
And actually, as a result of that failure, I got to see Roger Rocco for the first time. Roger, I know you're about to interview him, or
Yeah, I saw Roger Puddles and I were down in Bourbonnais a couple of months ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. And because of that last interaction with Jacobs, another student of Roger and Jake suggested I play for Roger. And Roger was able to distill what Jake was trying to bring across
Mhm.
to even more of a focus.
That's great.
Roger's more about the singing than the breathing. And and that's the dilemma I have with Jacobs. I love the singing talk, the breathing talk, and he actually admitted this. The breathing talk it's fascinating, and he's an expert in it. But it didn't help him play. Take a deep breath, but forget about it.
Right.
So
That's pretty. That's a very interesting subject. Let's talk about that more. Thomas, I believe that Jake was certainly all about the music, and from what I remember with my studies with him, he got into the physical aspects when he would see a player come in, and from a physical standpoint, they were prejudicing themselves against sounding good just because they were using excessive tension and pressures and that sort of thing.
Right.
But all things being equal, he would never talk about physical things if all he needed to do was talk about music.
Right.
So it's interesting, I think, to hear your point about the breathing versus the singing. Maybe you want to elaborate more on that.
That was again. That's the for me is the dilemma, because so much of his teaching with me and certainly at the classes was to talk about relaxation pressure curves and about the bags and the balloons and the tubes, which is all has its place. I think mostly in terms of taking a deep breath initially. In fact, he rarely talked about exhalation. It was usually about inhalation of air and breathing from the front of the mouth. Very valuable stuff, especially for long phrases, especially being comfortable at the end of the phrase. But when you got down to the nitty gritty, when he played the tuba, he was just thinking music.
He was
not thinking air, and he was suffering miserably at the end. He had 2 lungs. That's just a myth.
Right.
But he was suffering in terms of asthma, in terms of
COPD,
smokers in the house. That kind of thing. Getting older.
Just getting older.
Age 21 is our peak for vital capacity. But you can play in spite of these ailments.
Yeah.
If you make the music so dominant. And how do you get there? You elevate the awareness of the pitches.
Yeah.
All right. And this is another little twist that Roger has, is that yes, you want to think of the greatest brass sound you can think of, but if you just think, I want a dark sound, I want to sound like Dennis Brain without the pitch being there, then the body's confused and doesn't know what to do. It has to be the pitch first and foremost. Right. And that's the gift that Jake gave us. I think his singing voice was a huge gift, because I've pondered this a lot. What kind of voice should I have when I'm playing the horn? Is it my own singing voice? Is it Dennis Brain? Is it Vermeulen? Is it a robotic, like a pitch generator kind of voice?
Yeah.
I think a variety is best. Different colors, because that all feeds the singing. All right. Expression is critical, because that encourages the singing. The more we're thinking about the music, the less it's about function. All right. And my embouchure is not a classic embouchure. It's not. It looks funny. I've got 2 embouchures for mouthpiece, for horn playing. It doesn't matter at all. Jake's embouchure. You look at that great picture of his.
Yeah, in the Farkas book. Yeah.
Farkas book. It's a curvy line, and it doesn't matter. In fact, Jake would often play different sides of his mouth just to show off, to show that you can do it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's an interesting discussion, and through this particular research project, this video history project, just going back to say with Robert Rada, who was in the trombone section in the 50s, but he studied with Jake in the 40s before Jacobs started really. He did before the research stuff at the University of Chicago Medical School, and so before he started to really ramp up his physiological research, he had been doing it by books and by just observation in the studio. And he didn't have that many students back then. But Bob says he never heard any of this stuff from Jake. It was all just, he said, I had to come to every lesson prepared to sing every note with my voice.
Wow. That's fascinating.
And so, I think Jake's roots are in the singing.
Well, the story tells of being flat on his back for, I guess, kissing a girl, and he got scarlet fever.
Something like that.
And could only buzz the mouthpiece.
Could only buzz, yeah.
And came out of that hospital stay far better tubist, or was it cornet at the time?
Cornet, bugler.
Yeah.
He was a Boy Scout bugler.
Not to mention his mom teaching him cornet calls, bugle calls.
Just by rote, just by listening.
That's the Suzuki method too. That's how my 6-year-old son is learning violin.
There's so much connection between that. My late wife was a violinist, and she would teach some of that Suzuki method, and I thought, wow, there's so much connection between.
Well, every morning we're putting on Bill Prusel playing Suzuki, Twinkle Twinkle, every single morning.
Yeah.
So it's just, we're absorbing it,
just copying it.
And that's, I think you might, I shouldn't say presume, but I think most brass students nowadays don't listen to CDs enough.
Yes. And when they do it on they don't do a very good very good sound quality.
Right. And that's a huge loss.
It is a huge loss.
We used to spend, you remember these days, $15, $16 on a long box CD.
Yeah.
You valued it, you read the booklet top, front to back.
Yeah.
And you listened critically. And now music is just too easy. It's free. Imslip, YouTube, which were great tools, but we're not used to sitting down and critical listening.
There's not that investment, and so that commitment that goes along with the investment.
Right, and that feeds into what Jacob said. Imagination and imitation are your 2 big tools for success. I remember that quote, just him telling me that repeatedly, and I wrote that down. Imitation. And I remember at Rice, I thought, well, let me apply this even more. I brought in a portable CD player, the Sony, pretty thick thing, and listened to the opening of Strauss' First Horn Concerto, the fanfare with I think Vlatkovich, and listened to it, stopped it, play it back in my mind. Can I remember exactly the colors he had? Because each note was little tiny little differences, but a certain quality of sound. Play it back again, and then kind of imitate my horn.
Yeah.
And the critical thing there is record myself on the horn, and don't listen while I'm playing, but listen to the horn in my head.
Yeah.
And that's the temptation we have as brass players, is to listen to our own sound and start to analyze that, as opposed to issue statements. Don't ask questions. All right. Be a storyteller. Don't be a teacher. Don't be a judge as we're playing.
Right. Don't be the investigator while you're supposed to be the storyteller.
That's so hard.
Wearing different hats. It is. It is difficult to remember to put on the correct hat. Whether if you're a teacher, you're investigating the issues with a student, or whether you're performing, to put on the performer's hat. You really have to be mindful of that to get in the habit of putting on the right hat.
As a teacher, especially,
Yeah.
you hear a so-so student playing,
Yeah.
and then you pick up your tuba. You've got to immediately be a performer. You can't be fixing as you're playing.
Yes, you can't be evaluating while your own playing. What you've just been evaluating your students playing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about. You didn't see this on the video, but we took a couple takes to get this right, and both of us were stuttering a bit at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's because we have awareness of our voices.
Yeah.
Because we have the camera on.
Right.
Tuba, you're concerned about more often, how do I sound?
Mm-hmm.
It's natural. We want to sound good. When I speak to you, though, I don't wonder. As Jake says, we have multiple layers of sophisticated body function happening. I've got hand gesturing, eyebrows, the meaning of what I'm trying to say, but I have no awareness of how I sound, or even where my phrase is going. And that's another thought. On the tuba, on the horn, it's ideal, I think, if we don't know where the phrase is going to end up. I want to be creating it one note at a time, not thinking automatically it's going to go to this note or this note, draw arrows on the page left and right. It has to be as if we're composing it for the first time.
Exactly right. And I remember Jake would often use the analogy of just speaking. He would often address a class, and he would say, I just was at the motel this morning, and it was a little bit rainy outside, so I decided that I would go get my overcoat, and he would use this as an example just to say, I am one word by word creating for you, the listener, the phrase, but I am not speaking the phrase in its entirety at one time. I am putting together one word at a time.
And the listener hears a beautiful phrase.
Exactly.
And this is we might think only Pavarotti and only the greats can innately phrase, but I think everyone is fully capable of that as well.
Yeah. Thomas, you mentioned that you have a couple of different embouchures, one for buzzing and one for playing, and it's, I guess you mentioned that as an unusual looking embouchure. Did Jake ever talk about an embouchure with you?
No, never did. Never once. I'm trying to remember if I actually asked him about that, because most brass teaching, I'd say, forget most, I think 95% of brass teaching is predicated on either looking good or sounding or feeling good. Sorry, sounding good is important too. But the look, I had the Farkas, the porn book of embouchures too.
Right.
Looked at them all, and they were all different. And I was stunned. How can these be professional players? So I guess maybe it doesn't matter quite how we look. In mine, I've got this big kind of overlap front lip, top lip. Sorry. And Jake basically only focused on the respiration. We did a lot of work with, I guess the ball going up kind of thing. And then when I played, he asked me to take that similar deep breath on inhalation. But most of all, it was a lot of buzzing the mouthpiece. He had all the rims to buzz on. He didn't care about the quality of the buzz. He didn't care if it was, big buzz or focused buzz, or he just cared was the melody there, was the singing there. And then we transferred that same singing, not the feel, but the singing, to the instrument. And that's where people actually get in trouble also, is mouthpiece buzzing to the horn. It feels different.
Yeah.
There's no resistance or very little on the mouthpiece. That's why the burps are actually very useful, because you can add the same resistance. But no matter, if you transfer the singing quality and the singing in the head, then you're successful.
It's that being a motor nerve musician rather than a receptor nerve musician.
Absolutely, absolutely. He talks about the analogy of the player piano.
Yeah, player piano roll.
Or the player piano, just put in the player piano roll in our head, let that be the singing, and that feeds it. Or driving a car, he doesn't know how a car works all that well, but we have very simple controls.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is. I think it's mainly because it's not because of our teachers, it's because we care about how we sound.
Exactly.
That's I think that's the crux of the problem. And so the more we can focus on the message and be so expressive. I mean, my teacher, Bill Vermeulen,
Of course.
is one of the most expressive players out there.
Yeah.
And you might say it's over the top at times, but I'd rather have over the top and have great function than, spotty function and maybe more appropriate musicianship. I don't know if that's true, but I think being overly expressive is a wonderful thing to do. And Jake certainly was that.
Yes, very much stylized. Yeah, he was definitely given a message every time.
And the vibrato. I mean, we can kind of
not
joke about it, but his vibrato was very unique. It was him, but it always sounded like a great singer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
his singing background, I think, really played a lot.
That did, and the greats. I mean, Bud Herseth had UC Birling in his head.
Yes.
Did Jake have a certain? I should ask you. Did he have a certain singer in mind when he?
I don't know. I mean, he studied voice at Curtis, and so he studied with a tenor at Curtis, and so he was a semi-professional singer himself when he was in Philadelphia.
Really?
Yeah, he was did some work at a church, I think Fourth Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia, and then also on the radio. And he was an announcer, and so he's very voice oriented. Even while he was playing too, but it's actually the issues, the respiratory issues that he would experience, and the discomfort when he was studying singing that got him interested in finding out why. This is because when he was playing tuba, he had none of those. He experienced none of those issues.
He said voice teachers were the worst in terms of over teaching the respiration and the body use. He said brass teachers were the second worst, of course, in terms of over teaching that.
Yeah.
And of course, as you remember, the Fine Arts Building next door was a voice teacher.
Right. So
he would hear this and think, that's what's going on there. And but the main thing is, I really owe my career as a horn player to Jacobs, and then Roger, Rocco.
Yeah.
Without them, I would not be. I'd still be in Hawaii, which is a great place to be, but you can't make a living out there right now.
Yeah. That's not.
Jake was always a little envious of my being in Hawaii, and he thought it was a great job to have. You're out in paradise. Didn't realize they were missing paychecks and such.
Right.
But it's thanks to Jake that I was able to grow from being, really a middling, very average brass player at Rice University. Definitely middle of the crop, and it took me a long time. It's my 59th audition was my St. Louis audition. Persistence again.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I was able to grow as a player. So yeah.
Well, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mike.
It's a
pleasure to do this.
Such a wonderful perspective. I'm really happy to get it. I know Puddles was excited to meet you. I was telling him all about you on the way down, so he was happy.
Great to meet Puddles.
And he wanted me to be sure and give you a little something to remember him by.
Oh, Puddles. Thank you.
Genuine University of Oregon beverage dispenser. Go Ducks.
Wonderful.
So we hope that you'll accept this with our thanks.
Thank you, Mike. What a pleasure.
Likewise, Thomas. It's so good to meet you.
Great.
And now back to you.